staged it! You staged it! Staged it! You staged it! Beautiful presenter! Child abuser! You staged this! You're a child abuser! You child abuser! You child abuser! Where's Jimmy Savile? Where's Jimmy Savile? Get back! Traitor! You child abuser!
Keir Starmer just faced an awkward moment, getting booed and humiliated by a furious crowd. His latest speech was meant to rally the crowd, but instead it sparked outrage.
While I understand calls for a ceasefire at this stage, I do not believe that it is the correct position now, for two reasons. One, because a ceasefire always freezes any conflict in the state where it currently lies. And as we speak, that would leave Hamas with the infrastructure and the capability to carry out the sort of attack we saw on October the 7th. Attacks that are still...
So what did he say that turned cheers to jeers? Let's break it down.
Do you know what the average age of death with COVID is? According to official national statistics, it's 82 years and 3 months. The average age of death normally, 81 years. Do you understand that we because old people are dying? Do you see this graph? The last time we had this much death was 2008. That's the British Medical Journal. No, I came here to speak to this man, not your security. You have failed me.
Thank you.
I've been a Labour voter my entire life. You have failed to be the opposition. You have failed to ask whether lockdown was functioning.
Just behind. Can we just
Do you understand?
Shall we go
in? Thousands of people have died because you have failed to do your job and ask the real questions. Well, I am telling you...
Starmer was once the pride of Labour, but those glory days seem like a distant memory. It's like watching a top player completely lose their touch.
How many more children have died on our streets, Prime Minister? How many more children? How many more children, Prime Minister? Are we going to do something? Time to change, Starmer. Come on, needed. How many more children? Is it mine next? We're going to stand up for our children. That. Bye-bye. Got your photos, off you go. Make a real change, Prime Minister. Get something. Make a real change! Get our children! Go away!
I've just found out my friend's 9-year-old daughter was killed.
You're not wanted!
Scumbag! The person I've held as a child and
Who said it was for Who was it?
He arrived in Southport expecting a warm reception. He was the Labour leader after all, but instead he got a reality check he didn't see coming.
To those Labour voters who said their grandparents would turn in their graves, but they couldn't trust us with high office. To those who reluctantly chose the Tories because they didn't believe that our promises were credible. To the voters To the voters that thought we were unpatriotic or irresponsible, this is a... At this time on a Wednesday, it's normally the Tories that are heckling me. It doesn't bother me then. It won't bother me now. So you see,
The moment Starmer started speaking, the atmosphere changed. It was like the energy had been drained from the room. People fidgeted in their seats, exchanging glances that screamed, "Is this really happening?"
I want to pay tribute to Jeremy Corbyn, who's a friend as well as a colleague.
You wouldn't call Jeremy Corbyn a friend?
No. We have to make the case for freedom of movement. We don't want open borders. Freedom of movement has gone and it's not coming back.
Cutting off power, cutting off water, Keir?
Well, I think that Israel does have that right. I was not saying that Israel had the right to cut off water, food, fuel or medicine. Wounded by the media, the Sun in this city, a hurt for this city. And I certainly won't be giving any interviews to the Sun during the course of this campaign.
Did you write an article for some newspaper the other day? Surely that's not going to gain you any support across the Northwest.
Would you write for them again, Keir?
I would do, yeah.
Can you guarantee that under your leadership, the 2019 Labour commitments to nationalise water, energy, rail, the Royal Mail...
The reaction was impossible to ignore, as a sense of disbelief, disappointment and a growing sense of frustration filled the room.
The question is, did they do it because of political correctness, because they were worried about the fact that he was from an ethnic minority, or did they do it to cover up the utter failures of Prevent, of the police, of the courts, of the school, of the care workers? I mean, this guy was known to be just drifting around from time to time with violent intent, with knives. And they will have known that. And the whole thing is so inexplicable to all of us.
Tice, Reform UK's deputy leader, joins me now from Westminster. Richard, did Keir Starmer preside over one of the biggest cover-ups in British history?
Well, Dan, it looks that way. I mean, we don't know really anymore. We know that the Prime Minister's announced a public inquiry. Funny, isn't it, that when the Labour Party's not being challenged, he's quite happy to announce a public inquiry, but not when Labour councillors are involved in covering up a child rape gang scandal. But there we are. Look, I think the position of the Prime Minister is completely outrageous on this, and the British people want answers, frankly. This idea...
Interestingly, this wasn't the first time a Labour event in Southport had been held. Back when Jeremy Corbyn was in charge, the crowd was hanging on his every word. But with Starmer, it felt like watching a comedian bomb on stage.
Sky News has, for the first time, uncovered and mapped the networks on Telegram, the encrypted messaging app where the flames were fanned and the riots were organised. We've been working with Pros, an open-source intelligence startup which has a deep penetration of far-right and conspiracist networks on Telegram, to find out who is behind the messaging.
One interesting thing we can see here, especially considering this is the first day, is that the source of most of the information that people are talking about on Telegram isn't British, English language communities.
Every line was met with an awed silence. Instead of an applause, the crowd looked disinterested. For the Labour MPs at the event, they looked like they wanted to disappear.
Sorry to labour this point, but I think it's important. All summer we were repeatedly told that the Stockport attack was not terror-related, it wasn't being treated as terror-related. That wasn't true. Because in October, this monster was charged with a terror offence. Now, information was put into the public domain then that didn't collapse the trial. It didn't jeopardise justice. It was just months later. Now, you say you knew about the ricin and the Al-Qaeda bomb manual and he was known to the authorities. Did you know about that personally at the same time the public, the press, and you and the police were saying this is not terror-related? Because I think that's the nub of the issue and that's what's upset people. You say you couldn't speak out publicly, that you couldn't do that, but didn't the public have a right to know, not least the neighbours
One was practically hiding behind his notepad, while another was glued to her phone like it was a lifeline. They didn't need to say it, you could see it all over their faces. This was a disaster. The question is, what did Starmer say that was so wrong and got the crowd upset? He dove into his economic policies, convinced he was delivering a masterclass.
Prime Minister, what are your thoughts, having come here today to Southport, having met the emergency services involved, about what happened yesterday?
I came here to pay my respects to the victims and families who are going through raw pain and grief that most of us can't imagine. I can't imagine as a dad myself. To get a briefing from the Chief Constable and the emergency services about the ongoing investigation, but also importantly to have the opportunity to say to those that were responding yesterday from the emergency services, to say a personal thank you to them and to shake their hand, and to say that as Prime Minister on behalf of the country, we are grateful.
But to the crowd, he might be speaking gibberish, or a language lost in time. The disconnect was glaring, with faces filled with confusion rather than conviction noticeable among the crowd.
I'm going to start this hour with a roundup of the developments today in the case of the Southport incident that saw 3 little girls stabbed to death at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class. The suspect in that case is 18-year-old Axel Rudakubana. Today, police announced that he was facing 2 new charges.
The 2 further offences relate to evidence obtained by Merseyside police during searches of Axel Rudakubana's home address, as part of a lengthy and complex investigation which has been ongoing since the 29th of July. The additional charges are the production of a biological toxin, namely ricin, contrary to Section 1 of the Biological Weapons Act 1974, and possession of information, namely a PDF file entitled Military Studies in the Jihad Against the Tyrants, the Al-Qaeda Training Manual, likely to be useful to a person committing or preparing to commit an act of terrorism.
Okay. And it happened. The first big boo. It was like a dam bursting. The timing was incredible because it happened as Starmer was in the middle of explaining how his economic plan would save the country.
I think about the families, the friends, the loved ones, those directly impacted, and of course the wider community here. But there's no pretending, I think, that anybody in the country is not untouched by what happened yesterday.
You've talked about tackling knife crime a moral mission for your government. Is anything going to change? Is anything going to happen as a result of what happened yesterday?
I am very worried about high levels of knife crime.
A voice from the back let out a loud, unmistakable boo. It was as if he had spoken for the whole room, because from that moment the floodgates opened. Every other sentence was met with groans and boos before people began getting up to leave.
I think that the burden on working people is too high, and they are also paying huge rises in their costs. But for whether it's working people or others, and I know traditionally Labour leaders might have said, well, it's the tax lever I can't wait to get my hands on. That's not the case as far as I'm concerned, because all of my focus is on growing our economy. Because in the end, if all you do is tax the existing pie or cut the spending of the existing pie, which is ever reducing, you're going round and round in circles. I have to break out of it. I don't accept that things can't be better than they've been in the last 14 years. This is an election that's about change. We intend to change that. And to pick our country up, move it forward. We've already had substantial conversations with those people who are already ready and willing to put their sort of shoulder to the wheel with us to say we can do better than this, we can grow our economy, and that will be measured in living.
Quickly the mood shifted from uneasy to outright hostile. You could feel the disappointment hanging in the air, but the most striking part was Starmer's face. He looked genuinely stunned, as if it had never crossed his mind that the people could turn against him.
Has piped up. She said, these additional charges will undoubtedly be distressing for people in Southport. Excuse me. The most important thing is to get justice for Bibi, Alice and Elsie and their heartbroken families and all those affected by the attack. And nobody should put that at risk. The police and prosecutors have an important job to do in their investigation, pursuing every avenue and taking the action they need to ahead of the trial. We must support them and ensure that everything possible is done to deliver justice. Well, something people might find quite interesting is that Prime Minister Keir Starmer hasn't yet commented on any of this. Not personally, anyway. But a Number 10 spokeswoman...
But let's be honest, he did this to himself. Frankly, it's like he completely forgot the golden rule of politics. Know your audience. In Southport, he completely missed the mark. From start to finish, the whole event was a train wreck. It's the kind of moment that makes you wonder how someone can climb so high in politics, only to come crashing down so spectacularly.
Gordon Brown is opposed to this. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Angela Rayner, calls it obscene. Your colleague Jonathan Ashworth calls it heinous. Nigel Farage is ahead of this, of course. He would say that he would actually scrap the two-child benefit. Why are you behind Nigel Farage on this?
I think Nigel Farage accepts that he hasn't really funded any of his manifesto, and that's fine. If you don't fund your manifesto, you just say you can have anything you like or anything you think is important. We have taken the careful approach, saying every single thing that we are putting in a manifesto is fully costed and fully funded, and we're going to say before the election the things that we can't afford to do because of the damage to our economy. This is a tough one. I know how strongly Gordon Brown feels about it, and I know why he feels strongly about it. But I think one of the problems in politics is that before an election, people say, I'm going to do A, B and C.
Starmer walked in thinking he was the main attraction. However, he left looking more like the punchline of a bad joke.
It's a picture of Axel Rudikabana, weren't we? There he is. And then today, after he's pleaded guilty, we finally get the mugshot. Now, a bit of a difference there, isn't there? A bit of a contrast. Why was the media and the public denied that picture until now? Does that not indicate that there's an attempt to portray him as a young, angelic-looking schoolboy instead of the evil, demonic monster that he so clearly is? Interesting, too, is it not? The fact that there's been quite a lot of debate about the timing of the trial. When it started, on the same day as President Trump's inauguration, the biggest news day of the year, and the fact that there was no indication that Rudikabana would suddenly change his plea at the last minute. For some, particularly as the victims' families weren't even in court today, by all accounts, it all seems like an extraordinary coincidence, that, doesn't it?
But this goes way deeper than just one disastrous speech. Do you remember when Starmer was all in on a second referendum? Turns out that was just a phase. Back in 2016, he championed the Remain cause like it was his life's mission, pushing hard for a public vote on the final Brexit deal, only to suddenly change his tune. He told the crowd that Labour needed to move on from Brexit and they were not having it. The tension in the room was like a kettle ready to explode. You might think he's just trying to appeal to Brexit voters, but in the process, he's alienating his own base. Pro-Remain Labour supporters feel betrayed, like Starmer just stuck a knife in their backs.
The events today are just truly awful, and I know the whole country is deeply shocked at what they've seen and what they've heard. And I know I speak for everybody in the whole country in saying our thoughts and condolences with the victims, their families, their friends and the wider community. And it's almost impossible to imagine the grief that they're going through and the trauma that they're going through.
People want answers, and during that Southport speech, Starmer was interrupted 5 times while talking about Brexit. That's not just pushback, that's a full-blown revolt, and every single time the shock on his face said it all. He genuinely couldn't wrap his head around why his own supporters were turning against him. But it's not just Starmer. Labour as a whole is quietly backing away from its pro-Remain past. This is not going down well with supporters. So, some Labour members are ripping into Starmer and the party leadership across social media. And this isn't just noise, it could have real electoral consequences.
I don't like the state being able to kill us, which is why I oppose so-called assisted dying as well. But cases like this test me, because he is obviously evil, and what he did to those girls is beyond grotesque. And I can only imagine their suffering. Obviously, I have cried. I would expect every decent person hearing some of the details to be in tears. It is monstrous evil what has happened, and Starmer simply, he's just doing that thing where he just follows procedure and he follows what he thinks the rules say, and that's not human. That's what a robot does.
And we have AI for that if we...
Yeah, exactly. We could replace...
He is like a robot, but so is his Chancellor. She actually looks like Tweaky from Buck Rogers. I don't know where...
I do remember, yes, yeah.
OK, Buck. But look, obviously this is a very serious case. Why could he not have trialled him?
The pro-Brexit voting areas Labour once took for granted are slipping away. But why not? If you're a die-hard pro-Brexit, why would you stick with a party that's telling you to move on from one of the biggest political battles of the decade? But it gets worse, just when you thought Starmer couldn't dig himself into a deeper hole. What did he do this time? He praised Donald Trump. The same Trump Labour has been slamming for years. It's as if Starmer is trying to rewrite Labour's entire foreign policy overnight. But the real question is why? What's he actually trying to gain from this?
The party should become more like the MAGA party.
I think there are a lot of parallels that we should draw from the MAGA movement when it comes to UK Conservatives. For too many years, we were, a centrist, vanilla puddle in the Conservative Party. We oversaw record immigration, we oversaw high taxation, and it was on our watch that children were subjected to irreversible gender surgical interventions. That all happened on our watch. We were not Conservatives. The MAGA movement is authentically conservative. It's about faith, it's about flag, and it's about family. And those abiding values are what people are crying out for in the UK as well as in the US.
And what's your advice to Keir Starmer as he engages with the new Trump presidency?
Listen, my advice to Keir Starmer is to stop being an idiot because, Keir Starmer and half of the cabinet voted against President Trump's state visit last time round. We've got so many of members, David Landry notably, having carried out vitriolic and ridiculous personal attacks on Donald Trump. They're all now desperately trying to backtrack and they're all desperately trying to suck up to President Trump. At best, they're going to be irrelevant. But at worst, they have done great harm to the UK's national interest. So they've got to grow up, stop playing petty student politics, and actually stand up for the UK, get a free trade agreement, work on ensuring our military and security agreements are robust.
So Starmer gets on a call from Trump, and instead of keeping it professional or calling him out like every other Labour leader before him, he starts praising Trump's role in Gaza. Yes, Trump is the same one whose style of leadership has been called a walking disaster for international relations by Labour and Starmer in the past.
I would like to send my warmest congratulations to President Trump on his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States. For centuries, the relationship between our two nations has been one of collaboration, cooperation, and enduring partnership. It is a uniquely close bond. Together, we have defended the world from tyranny and worked towards our mutual security and prosperity. We will continue to build upon the unshakable foundations of our historic alliance as we tackle together the global challenges we face and take our partnership to the next level, focused on shared opportunities ahead for growth. I look forward to our next meeting as we continue our shared mission to ensure the peace, prosperity, and security of our two great nations.
Now Starmer is acting like he's some kind of peacemaker. Did he believe this would make him look like a diplomatic genius? Because if anything, it's done the exact opposite. Labour supporters are furious and convinced that Starmer has abandoned everything the party represents. Left-wing MPs aren't just unhappy, they're livid, accusing him of tossing Labour's traditional foreign policy out the window. This isn't some minor slip-up. It's a complete U-turn from how past Labour leaders have dealt with Trump.
This is your favorite president here. I recently spoke to your Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. Two-tier Keir, I think you call him. He's been getting some, oral assistance. Guy can't talk properly, speaks a bit funny, like he's still got a butt plug in. Very strange. But he's a big fan of Trump, I hear. So, if two-tier Keir likes it in the rear, that's fine by me. I hope Keir Starmer follows my Trump blueprint and you can...
Jeremy Corbyn refuses to attend a state banquet with Trump. Sadiq Khan openly condemned his Muslim ban. Even Tony Blair, despite his controversies, took a more measured approach. But not Starmer. He's practically welcoming Trump with open arms. This isn't just a bad look, it could seriously damage Labour's relationship with progressive voters. Labour has always positioned itself as the party that stands against figures like Trump, but now the very people who once trusted them are feeling betrayed.
Interesting was Donald Trump basically saying, yes, he's a liberal, but that's his philosophy. We're very different, but he's a good man, and a lot of regard for him. Did that surprise you? Because your lot seem to spend a lot of time projecting the image that Trump is on the side of Farage.
Well, I think first thing to say is obviously it makes a change from Labour, who basically sent a whole load of people over to root for the Democrats. And then David Lammy and various other people have been extremely rude about Donald Trump in the past. So it's good to see there's a bit of rapprochement. Do we take it seriously, Michelle? Probably not. I would describe it as verbal baby food, which is necessary in global politics. Do I think Donald Trump and Keir Starmer are cut out to get on well? Very definitely not. And I'm sure that they'll be finding lots of things to disagree over in the future, not least the Chagos Islands, probably trade, lots of other issues.
Starmer, once held as Labour's saviour, is now staring down a full-blown mutiny. And it's not just the left that's turning on him. Centrists are jumping ship too. MPs are sharpening their knives and whispers of a leadership challenge are already spreading. Meanwhile, the polls are tanking. Labour's approval rating is in freefall, and even in its traditional strongholds, voters are walking away. This isn't just a policy crisis, it's a leadership crisis. And unless Starmer pulls off a miracle, Labour could be headed for an electoral disaster, so brutal Southport will look like just the opening act. The real question now, can Labour bounce back, or are they destined to crumble under the weight of Starmer's missteps?
So I want to be clear at the outset, against the backdrop of these dangerous times, the idea that we must choose between our allies, that somehow we're with either America or Europe, is plain wrong. I reject it utterly. Attlee did not choose between allies.
One thing is clear, the party's future has never looked more uncertain. If you like what you watched, like the video and subscribe to the channel for more interesting political content.